Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Schaberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are here and sponsored by Deborah Irwin and Workforce Solutions. We are really happy to be here with you today. Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We do a lot of webinars on all topics surrounding special needs and transition and kind of all things that you need to have in your toolkit as you're planning for your loved one with special needs. So we are excited to talk about this topic today, transition tips for launching your special needs teen into adulthood. This is a topic, and we, as parents, we hear that word transition all the time, and transition means a lot of different things and a lot of different categories, whether it's medical transition, educational transition, financial transition. There's just so many different things. We're going to talk on a variety of topics today surrounding transitions. We're not spending a whole lot of time on the medical side of things. So today, we can't see you and we can't hear you, but we know you're there and we're glad you're here. We do want to answer as many questions as we can. Today's meeting is being recorded, and you will get an email later today or tomorrow with the recording. We want to hear your questions. Deborah is going to be monitoring the chat box today. So if you have questions, if you'll put your questions in the chat box, and then she'll read them out to me. And I prefer to kind of go through those questions and take as many questions as we can as we're going through the presentation, as long as time allows. So don't be shy. If you have a question, somebody else probably has that same question, and they're going to be helped by that as well. So thanks for joining us. Like I said, we are very glad you're here. I come to you from a perspective as a professional working with special needs families. It's basically all I've done all of my adult life. But I also come to you as a parent. I have 4 kids and 2 children with disabilities, one that has transitioned into adulthood and one that is in the midst of transitioning into adulthood. And the process is bumpy, and I know what I know, and I do what I do, and I know this stuff backwards and forwards. And we these webinars and these series were born because I want to equip you with the tools and resources and knowledge that you need to be successful, because what we hear every day is oftentimes parents are feeling pretty overwhelmed with this process and what they need to do on these transition side of things. So, okay. So first things first, I kind of like to talk about the story of life of comparisons, right? And we live in a world of comparisons. It starts early. It starts early when our kids go to school for the very first time, preschool, church, whatever it is. We're always comparing ourselves to others, even as adults, and our kids are too. But the big thing here that I really want to hit on is that the self-esteem is so critical. And our kids that are transitioning, they already are pretty delicate in the self-esteem area. And as our kids are growing up and becoming teenagers, it starts in grade school. They start recognizing they're oftentimes very much aware of what their shortcomings are, or how maybe they don't stack up to others that they're comparing themselves to. Sometimes they're comparing themselves to siblings, overachieving siblings and other things like that. So I think, first things first when it comes to transition is let's throw those comparisons right on out the window. Let's set realistic expectations for our kids, and let's meet them where they are. Understanding their diagnoses as far as challenges and strengths. A lot of our kids it might be from a maturity perspective, from a cognitive perspective, a lot of our kids may be behind their peers, maybe many years behind their years. Maybe it's just a few, and they are lacking, some of the maturity that they need. So considering and thinking about non-traditional path, we're going to talk about traditional path and non-traditional path today, but just, giving them permission, giving yourself permission to say, hey, it's okay if they don't go down this traditional path, the one that everybody, quote unquote, says is normal. What is normal anyway? So we want you to keep an open mind, consider these options. something that is really trending that we're seeing on a pretty regular basis is a gap year or some of these transition programs. A lot of the public schools across the state of Texas have 18-plus programs. The public schools, you're going to want to work with your school and through the ARD process and really talk to them about what your intentions are. Some people know and some people don't know that your children can stay in the public school with a disability till age 22. So kind of thinking about that and what makes good sense for you or for your child if they remain in that program, what value is coming out of that program. And something to consider on that, it's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's a right or wrong for you and for your family. I would say is, are they thriving? Are they doing well in that program? And if they can stay and they're thriving and doing well and they're maybe not ready to move to a more traditional path or on to community college or the workforce just yet, then those transition programs or those 18-plus programs may be a good fit. And while they're there, they're growing that maturity that they so desperately need for their independent skills going forward. Something else to think about here is delaying a driver's license. While I know that some kids with disabilities will never, ever drive, I often hear that we're hopeful and optimistic that my son or daughter will be able to drive one day. But, we're concerned about that. They have executive functioning, issues. They have processing speed delays or some of the other things. Maybe they have some mobility issues and you wonder how or if they would be able to respond or react promptly, if, in the event of an emergency or, everyday driving is basically that. So one of the things that we did with our kids is we were able to find disability instruction, and there's various ones across the state, but you want to look for that. So a lot of the hospital systems, they have programs where they'll do some testing. It's oftentimes covered by your health insurance. And this is similar testing that maybe your parents or grandparents may have gone through if they had a stroke and they got back to driving. And they're really testing all of the areas of the brain that are necessary and critical for success in driving. And so if you're wondering, can or can't my child do this, and that assessment might be, something that you want to consider. Another thing is there are driving schools, and you can kind of Google this for your area, that really specialize in behind the wheel training for individuals with a disability. And there's people that drive with disabilities that don't have any adaptive equipment on their vehicles, but then there are certainly all kinds of adaptive equipment for vehicles as well. And the places that do that can make the recommendations on what type of adaptive equipment might be relative to your loved one. So let's think about trade school, community college, a reduced course load. Many of our kids are not ready for, the 12 credit hours that come at the community college or the university. And so, dipping your toe in and trying one course at a community college or a trade school or something like that may be something that you can consider. And a lot of these trade schools, these hands-on jobs are things that, any kids that are on the autism spectrum or things like that, working with their hands or working on something that, they may be really, really good at that. And a lot of these trade schools and these certificate programs or license programs and things like that, they are really going to give your child some tools to be successful and make as much or more than what they could make on a 4-year university degree program. So I understand that people with disabilities also, there are also many people with disabilities that are gifted and talented. And so some of those issues are, not necessarily the things that they have to worry about. Consider living at home versus on campus at first. Again, dipping your toe in a little bit at first to see if they're ready, especially if the maturity, is an issue. So what we want to, really prevent is that the kids are leaving the public school. We saw a lot more of this during the pandemic than before. But what we want to do is we want to plan early, and we want to think about what is it that this looks like. Is it school? Is it school and work? Is it work? There's so many different things that can be doing, but what we don't want them to do is to come home from school, graduate from high school, and not have a plan. And again, with those 18 plus or those programs that last to age 21 or 20, that gives you some additional time to be thinking about the path forward and the next step. And of course, those programs are free through the public school, where transition programs post 18 outside of the school are going to have cost, and sometimes that cost can be pretty significant. So if that's not in the family budget, that's something also to consider as you're looking at the various programs that are out there. There are a number of transition programs all across the state for individuals with disabilities, all ranges of disabilities. So looking at some of those programs, we do have lists of those available, but some of those programs take waivers that you may be getting through the state of Texas, and a lot of the programs are private pay, and some would be some type of combination. So you should be aware of that. And if you're thinking that that is your path forward, then definitely consider the cost associated for that and planning for that. So a big thing, this was a big takeaway for me when we were going through this with our kids. A big thing was about accommodations. So when we're thinking about transitioning, I want you to think for a moment the accommodations that you have had in the public school or the private school, or what you have been using if you happen to find yourself in a homeschool setting. The interesting thing when you're kind of moving on to the college level, whether you've done it with another child or not, is accommodations don't transfer. So, K-12 accommodations don't transfer to the college level. So there has to be some careful consideration taken in this area, especially if those accommodations are necessary to your loved one's success. So there's been a lot of change in this area since the pandemic. One thing that you should make note of is every school, every university, every community college, trade school, they all have different requirements for obtaining accommodations for our inconvenience. It's not like just one list for the state of Texas of what you have to do to get accommodations. That would just be simply too easy. Oftentimes, what we're seeing is they're going to want to see updated testing within the last 3 to 5 years. The testing that I'm talking about, this is going to be your neuropsych testing, your learning disability testing. Sometimes it could be a vocational evaluation testing, but usually that neuropsych is going to have an IQ score. Also, it's going to have recommendations for accommodations in that testing. Some public school districts, most do not, do this level of testing, and sometimes the testing that the school does is not necessarily on this caliber, but sometimes it will be accepted by the university or the school. So if you do have some testing, you should, check with that particular school or university to see if they'll accept what you have. Usually it needs to be updated within the last 3 to 5 years. There are some caveats to this. They have been a little bit more patient and a little bit more lenient on the 3 to 5 years. Some of the schools, because it's been harder to get testing since the pandemic, it's been harder to get the results. Those are some of the reasons that they've kind of loosened up some of those requirements. You want to check those requirements early. You want to start by talking to the Office of Disability. Sometimes they're called ODS, like it could be called Disability Services Office of Disability. That's where you start and learn about the accommodations that the school has. They usually have a good website, which will have a form on there that you can download to request those accommodations. So it's just start early. And I would suggest that as we're kind of thinking about schools and potential good spots for our kids with disabilities, I started by narrowing down the list of schools that we were interested in by, kind of looking at the degree path and programs that were available that we had interest in. That was first. And then second, I started narrowing schools down and checking them off the list by evaluating their offices of disability. If you've got a kid with a disability and they have accommodations and they need accommodations and the Office of Disability at the particular school that you're looking at isn't that good, then I would say that you should say next and go on to the next school. All offices of disability are not created equally. The bigger and better offices of disability have a lot of tools and resources at their disposal that don't cost you or your student extra money to use. Some examples might be audiobooks. They might be voice-to-text recognition software, note-taking software. I mean, there's a lot of different things that they have out there, but the smaller disability offices oftentimes have smaller budgets, and they don't have as much money to have some of these tools and resources. SAT, ACT, AP exams, college course, graduate level exams. The SAT is collegeboard.org. So again, a lot of these schools have relaxed some of their testing requirements. It used to be that most universities required an SAT or an ACT, and they had very particular scores that they would consider for admission. They've relaxed some of that. Some of these schools have become test optional for SAT and ACT. But just because you have accommodations on the public school level, those accommodations don't flow over to the SAT and the ACT. You have to apply through the College Board, and you can go to collegeboard.org, and in the search bar, you can type disability or accommodations, and it is going to take you to their site. You're going to see their forms and their requirements. Those forms, the request for accommodations, is going to have to be signed off on by a doctor. If you already have the testing, you submit that form signed off by a doctor, along with any testing that you have, and usually the process for approving isn't terribly long. But you can expect that it will take at least, I would say, expect that it's going to take 1 to 2 months. So don't wait to the last minute to get these accommodations if you have your child scheduled for the SAT or ACT. ACT has their own website and their own forms and requests for accommodations. So if you're taking both exams, just know that that you need to request that for the ACT as well. One other thing that I just wanted to mention here, and we'll talk about this, I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but through vocational rehab, through the Texas Workforce Commission, a lot of these things, this testing can be pretty expensive. It could be $3,500 to $5,000, some of this testing. And typically that testing is not usually covered by insurance, depending on the diagnosis of your child, but most of the time it's not covered by insurance. But if your child is enrolled in VR, the vocational rehab, it is possible when they're putting that employment plan together, that some assessments are done through that process and covered by VR. So just think about that and be creative. Also, your local intellectual disability authority, which is in every county and excuse me, throughout the state of Texas, but they do testing as well. So if you're connected to your local intellectual disability authority, they may be able to do some testing as well. And if you're not connected, you can reach out and you can do a self-referral to your local authority. So when it comes to work, reasonable accommodation is required if it does not pose undue hardship. You can look at these things at the DOL.gov. One thing I also wanted to mention here too is that there are things called registered apprenticeships all throughout the United States, and these are for individuals with disabilities. So if you're thinking, or maybe they need a gap year, maybe they need to work for a little while, or look at some apprenticeships where they're training them while they're working and earning money, I would say definitely check those out, because there can be some really good ones out there with good companies and really have good programs in working with individuals. Okay, so here are some of the post-high school options they're not in any particular order of our preference, and we don't work for them, and they don't work for us. We have a more extensive list that we're happy to share with you. But the post-high school options, there's a lot of programs all across the state of Texas. I do see one on here that's not in Texas. Lynn University is actually in Boca Raton, Florida. So, but there's a lot of programs out there for individuals with disabilities. There's ones for individuals with autism, ones for IDD. There's just a lot of different programs out there. So even if your child has had a lot of challenges in the past, it doesn't mean that there isn't a program out there. So as you're considering these options and making your spreadsheet, I always say that tongue in cheek, but on the programs that might be a good fit for your loved one, consider some of these and know what the deadlines are. When does the application open up? How many slots do they typically have? Are they meeting in person or online? A lot of our students need to meet in person as opposed to online. Some need to meet online because of compromised immune systems. So find that out. But what I just want to say here is a lot of these programs don't have like an unlimited number of slots. Some of them may only have 2 to 4 slots, right? So you want to make yourself aware of, kind of what is the competition, what is the likelihood of getting in, and should you apply to multiple programs, not just one, if not the competition, but the seats are limited, to the number, that they have. So just think about that. Okay. So Bloom Consulting, I always like to mention Bloom Consulting. They're someone that we've, again, we don't work for them. They don't work for us. They have their own company, but they're really great. And I would say check them out. Check out their website. But they have a Campus Connections program. They do all kinds of stuff in addition to Campus Connection. They have a home, they do vocational evaluation. You can hire Bloom personally. Sometimes VR services, vocational rehab services, hires Bloom and pays for that. But this Campus Connection program is just really to support the neurodiverse college student with various disabilities, and it's a wraparound program. And they really, they're getting a coach, and they have mentoring and guidance and navigational support. This is $1,000 a month, which sounds like a lot, but some of the other programs that we know that kind of go alongside them while they go to the community college or the college, some of those programs we know of are, 50 to 60 grand a year in addition to the cost of the tuition of the school. So $1,000 a month. And this takes some of that, holding them accountable and kind of talking them through and working them through things. And takes that off of you, because a lot of times our teenagers, maybe it's just at my house, but anyway, sometimes our teenagers don't think we're as smart as they used to when they were 3 or 4, and sometimes hearing the same information that we provide from somebody else, and hearing it from a coach and somebody working with them is much more effective. Bloom Consulting has a good partnership with Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas. And Sam Houston is one that we also know has a really great Office of Disability. There's great offices of disability all across Texas, but we do know that is a good one. Okay. So when it comes to transitioning your child with disabilities into adulthood and this magic age of them turning 18, there's a lot of things that we need to consider and things that change kind of overnight when they turn 18. So what we're talking about here is how to get started with special needs planning and kind of what you need to do, what needs to be on your radar, and things to think about. Working with a special needs planner is going to help you formulate your plan. There's some differences between a special needs planner and a financial planner. There's some similarities in that we have a lot of the same licenses. But some of the differences are that, we're certified as, a National Social Security Advisor. We're members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, and we're nuanced in all things special needs. So when it comes to finance and it comes to money in the right buckets and planning for your loved one with a disability that may qualify for benefits through the Social Security Administration, A special needs planner is going to help make sure that you have things set up properly that's not going to, A, disqualify your child, or B, make them never qualify to begin with. So as you're starting, the special needs planning trail, it's important to gather all the necessary documents. What do those documents look like? These are all things financial planning, all things that you already have in place. This could be any insurance protection, both through your employer and outside of your employer. It could be like life insurance, disability, long-term care. This is going to be all of your financial statements, 401ks, 403bs, pension plans, brokerage statements, any invested accounts, those types of things. This is going to be your wills, your trusts, any other legal documents that you might have in place, like a power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. One of the things that we suggest is developing a letter of intent. And we do have a whole webinar on a letter of intent. I like to refer to this as a family love letter. So we eat, sleep, and breathe our loved ones. We know them backwards and forwards. We know what makes them, what makes them go and what makes them shut down, and everything there is to know, from what they were diagnosed with and when, and what medications they take, what they're allergic to, what does an average day look like, what does a bad day look like, who are their doctors. A letter of intent, we should call it a letter of intents because it is long. We do have a form fillable document for this. It's 20 pages long. But the thing is as parents, we have forgot more than anybody will ever know as it relates to caregiving of our loved one. And if something happens to you and you're incapacitated or you've passed on, who else knows all of these things? And maybe it's the other spouse, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's another loved one, but oftentimes we just do what we do. Maybe one spouse is a caregiver, one spouse is working outside of the home. So sometimes even in our own home, the daily routine down to the nth degree is not even known by the other spouse. So think about that. Give yourself some time. If you don't have a letter of intent in place, it can be emotional to fill this out. Once you have it, we think it's important to share with a spouse. We also think it's important to share with any future caregivers. Let them know where that letter of intent is. So if something happens unexpectedly to you or your spouse, people can put their hands on it. We want you to formulate a vision of how you hope things will look for your special needs child, but also you, okay? You and your spouse are important. And so if we're planning, if we have a child that might need care for the rest of their life, not just the rest of our life, that changes the trajectory of what we had hoped and planned for from a retirement perspective. Everybody has a vision of retirement and what that looked like. And sometimes it's traveling, and sometimes it was, just doing nothing. And sometimes it was volunteering. There's so many different hopes and dreams that people have in retirement. And are those still achievable? Are those still achievable in balancing a child that needs care for the rest of their life? And I would say the answer is yes, with a little bit of planning, balancing that to where your child is whole and happy and having a fulfilling life and doing things that are meeting them where they are, but also having that balance that you and your spouse, if you're married, are finding that balance in retirement as well. Because what happens when we don't look at ourselves and our own health and well-being is it limits our time and ability to be a caregiver. So that balance there is so very, very important. We are able to really help developing a future care plan. A lot of times, people, I hear a lot when we're in a transition phase of our life, when our kids are 16, 17, 18 years old, I hear, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful and optimistic that my child will be able to live semi-independently or independently in the future. We're not there yet, but I'm still hopeful. So what we tell families is you're not alone. Many families are in that same boat. But what we want you to do is plan for the worst and hope for the best. So if we plan for the worst by developing a future care plan and identifying how much is future care going to cost, what does that look like? how much is needed in the future once I'm gone to continue future care. If we have that plan in place and we know those numbers and we have planned for those, when the best happens and your child is semi-independent or independent in the future, then you simply have a better and a stronger retirement, and that's okay. We do suggest as transitioning, so whether it's considering touring facilities such as Brookwood, Marbridge Foundation, Daymark Living, there are so many facilities all across the state of Texas. Again, we have a spreadsheet for that. If you know your child's going to need care for the rest of their life and they're going to need some type of living arrangement, you don't plan for them to live with you forever, you may want to consider touring some of these facilities, finding out how much they cost, getting your name on the list. Some of these waiting lists can be 5 years or longer. This is true for transition programs as well that are outside of the public school system. So if you got someone early high school, mid high school, you want to start looking at transition programs and knowing what's out there and getting your names on the list for those as well. We also like to always mention that we suggest to make careful considerations before naming siblings as a future caregiver. This is something that comes up, and it is an emotional topic. If you do have a child that's going to need care for the rest of their life, of who is going to care for this child when I'm gone, who is this? And a lot of families name their siblings, and this sometimes works if the sibling is 15 or 20 years older. We've got step siblings or half siblings or things like that. We like to see where siblings fiscally responsible siblings could be the successor trustee of the special needs trust that helps pay for care for your loved one, but we don't want them to be in that obligatory yes role where they said yes to something, but it really dampened their hopes and dreams of maybe graduating college or getting married or buying a house or building a house or having children of their own or things like that. So we want there to be balance in that loving relationship and not one of resentment, and that's why we mention that. Looks like we have a question. Is the letter of intent available to the public or just clients? We typically share that with our clients, but we'll put that out there today. When we send the recording, we will send the slides of today's presentation, and we'll go ahead and send a PDF of the letter of intent as well, so that way you can have that. It doesn't hurt us for you to take the steps that you need to take to be successful. So if we can help along the way, those letters of intent, we do suggest if you're not using a template to at least use a Word document, so that way you can go back and update it. Probably twice a year, every 6 months, maybe once a year if your condition is a little bit more static. Some people's disability is changing and moving fast. Okay, so how will my child's care be funded? There's a couple of things that we spoke about previously. Special Needs Trust is one of them. A Special Needs Trust is a place that your child can have money above and beyond requirements for Medicaid and SSI that won't be counted against them. So there's a such thing as a special needs trust, a third-party special needs trust, also called a supplemental needs trust. And then there's a first-party special needs trust as well. So the first-party special needs trust is their money. It could have been awarded through a lawsuit or a settlement or things like that. A first-party special needs trust is their money. This does require a Medicaid payback. So we have entire presentations on special needs trusts, so I don't want to get off on a tangent too much on that. But it is important. So if you have a child with a disability that may qualify for SSI and Medicaid or is already getting SSI and Medicaid, it is important to understand that there are two places basically that you can have money above and beyond the requirements. So one is an ABLE account and one is a special needs trust. So as we're talking about SSI and Medicaid, so first things first, many people, their children, even though their child is disabled, never qualified for SSI and Medicaid. So you've got a child that's in high school, they're not 18 yet, you've applied, your child is clearly disabled, but you were denied. SSI and Medicaid is a means-based program. It is for individuals with modest means, and basically those means are $2,000 or less to their name if you're single, and $3,000 or less to your name if you're married. You can have one house, you can have one car, plus the amount of assets that I just mentioned. So you may have been clipping along the way all this time, and your child has never qualified, so it never occurred to you that they may qualify when they turn 18. So the thing is prior to age 18, when the Social Security Administration is looking at your assets, they're looking at yours, you and mom and dad's assets, and doing that means-based test. So if you have more than what I just mentioned, then your child, even though they're disabled, they simply just do not qualify, and that is correct. But the magic thing that happens when they turn 18 is it's based off of their assets and not yours. So you want to make sure, so if you're taking notes here, you want to make sure that your child doesn't have more than $2,000 assets in their name outside of a special needs trust or an ABLE account, okay? So not more than $2,000 in their name. What if they do? Okay, what if they do right now? So what if they do right now? Then you can open an ABLE account. We can help you with that. You can open a special needs trust. You can get those assets into the ABLE account in the special needs trust. People have the clever idea of, what if I just hide those assets? And there's really no such thing as hiding from the Social Security Administration. What you can do is you can spend assets down, okay, for the benefit of said child. All of our kids, they all have needs. They have medical needs. They have out-of-pocket medical expenses, drug expenses. They may have adaptive equipment. It could be a car. It could be an iPhone. It could be that laptop they need for their online learning that they're doing now. So you can spend down those assets. Just keep your receipts. So no such thing as hiding it. They will find it, but just go about it the right way. So the reason we want to, talk about SSI and Medicaid is if you've never applied, then you do, if your child has a disability, you do want to apply once they turn 18. You can call your local, not the national, call your local Social Security office about 3 months prior to their 18th birthday and let them know that you would like to schedule an appointment for the month that they turn 18. You can do it anytime the month that they turn 18, that calendar month. It doesn't have to be after their actual birthday. The Social Security Administration offices have been closed to the public. They've been taking calls. They've been accepting online applications, but they have been not been meeting face-to-face since the pandemic. I did see a note this week that they are semi-planning to reopen in January. So we'll see how that goes with Omicron out there. I'm not completely convinced that that's going to happen. But plan early. Appointments are hard to get. And calling 3 months in advance for the month that they turn 18 is a good idea, because if you call the month that they turn 18, it could be 3 or 4 months, or they might just simply tell you they have 0 appointments. What we want to establish here is that their disability started prior to age 18. Prior to age 22. So there are benefits through the Social Security Administration under a parent's record. As parents, we're workers. We work and we pay into the Social Security system, and we have quarters earned. And when we have a child that has a disability and their disability started prior to age 22, your child may be eligible for childhood disability benefits under a parent's record. And basically how this works, and we have entire presentations on this, is when you retire or go on disability through the Social Security Administration, if you have a disabled adult child, then they'll be entitled up to 50% of your benefit as long as you're alive and they remain disabled. And upon your death, then they'll be entitled to 75% of your benefit amount. And they'll also be eligible for Medicare after 2 years of becoming eligible for RSDI, retirement survivor disability income. They'll also be eligible for Medicare. So there's a lot of things that's going on here, and it's very confusing to most people. So SSI and Medicaid are means-based. Social Security disability and Medicare is worker-based. But when we have a child, the disability prior to age 22, then they can be covered under a parent's record. Now, they're not going to start getting benefits under a parent's record until a parent has actually retired or gone on disability themselves. And at that time, typically what happens, in every situation is a little bit different, they'll switch over from SSI to RSDI. So it is important to know your options out there. Again, we're nationally certified as Social Security advisors. We have specialized software that plugs in mom and dad's work records. So it will tell us exactly when and how you should pull the trigger on your Social Security benefits to maximize the benefits for all spouses. There are such things as spouses drawing off of another spouse record, and this is especially true when we have a caregiver parent at home and the other parent working. And then there are such things as household maximums that you can get. So we're able to help you with all of that, and our software will spit it out very specifically. It takes all of the earnings years, all of your benefit information, and it plugs it in that way. Okay, I see a question. How many years back does SSI and Medicaid look when they turn 18? So I think they go back 6 months. So as far as back pay, so if you never applied for SSI and Medicaid, I think typically that they'll go back 6 months from the date of the date of the approval, I think it is. So it's not, they don't go back years and years and years when it comes to that. But one thing I also want to mention is if your child is already above age 22 or already above age 18 and you feel like you missed the deadline, it's okay, you didn't. You just got to be able to prove that disability started prior to age 22 for that qualification under a parent's record. Now, some of our kids work, right? So some of our kids are earning their own working quarters under Social Security disability. So in a few cases, and this is few and it's not that common, your child may be eligible for SSI and Medicaid. They may be eligible for Social Security disability under their own record in some small amount, and they could be eligible under a parent's record. And so you never get and like plus more, and we have this huge giant benefit. You get the higher of the benefits, and they work that all out at the Social Security Administration. Okay, we say, okay, this is a great question. I have another question here. It says, my son is 16 and we have a 529 account. Will that disqualify him from Medicaid? So the interesting thing on the 529Cs for college is that it's basically in the parent's name or the grandparent's name. That the son is the beneficiary, and as long as the payment never goes directly to your son, it goes to the school. It doesn't necessarily count against them. And once they turn 18, again, the parent is the owner of that account. Now, what we run into a lot is we have a lot of families that have 529Cs and they thought that their child was going to college and now they're not, or now they are not sure. So that is something that we run into as well. You can convert your 529C to a 529A, and you can move $15,000 a year to a 529A if you want to do that. The cool thing about the 529As, again, sorry to keep saying this, but we do have entire presentations on the 529A. But the cool thing about the 529A is that it can pay for college. It is that is a qualified expense under the ABLE account. If it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. That means vacations. That means cars. That means housing. I mean, there's so many things that you can pay for out of an ABLE account. An ABLE account can pay for tutoring. 529Cs really can't. So there may be, it might provide more flexible options for getting the money out of the 529C by having it in an ABLE account in the future. Okay, let's see if we have. Okay, I think we're good on questions for right now. We'll keep it moving. All right. So about the ABLE accounts. Basically, the beneficiary is the account owner, so not the parent like the 529C. Income earned in the account is not taxable. Contributions are not deductible, but the cool thing is it does not jeopardize SSI and Medicaid or other public benefits as long as the account balance remains less than $100,000. So this is where I tell you, this is why you need a special needs trust and an ABLE account. A special needs trust, you can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust. An ABLE account, you can have only up to $100,000 or they will disqualify for SSI and Medicaid. As for right now, you can only put $15,000 a year into an ABLE account. There's an additional $12,000 and amount, like call it 12.5, but that's not the exact amount that you can put in if the individual is working, but you still have to keep it under $100,000 total account balance before disqualifying. So there are ABLE accounts. We work with people in setting up ABLE accounts. Texas was kind of late to the party in setting up the ABLE account, but there is an ABLE account in Texas. We favor more ABLE accounts that have connections to programs where you could have maybe a little bit of a higher yield in the account. All right, so when do I need a special needs trust and guardianship? These are all buzzwords in the special needs community. We hear about them all the time, but we don't always know. So again, the special needs trust is going to preserve the benefit eligibility while providing resources for your special needs child. It's an unlimited amount of money that you can have in there. A third-party special needs trust does not have a Medicaid payback. And so what that means is if we're going to leave assets to our loved one for their special needs, we can leave it to a third-party special needs trust that won't disqualify them for any benefits, like our life insurance proceeds or our assets when we're gone. It won't disqualify them, and there's no Medicaid payback on that. So that is the right way to leave your child assets. You do not ever want to name your child directly, your child with a disability, your adult child with a disability, directly as a beneficiary on anything other than that special needs trust, or it is going to cause problems with their SSI and Medicaid. Guardianship. Oh, actually, before I'm going to step back to that special needs trust. The one reason you need a special needs trust and an ABLE account too is an ABLE, if you're getting SSI and Medicaid, an ABLE account can pay for housing, like monthly rent or like a monthly mortgage payment, and a special needs trust cannot. A special needs trust can buy a house outright, but it doesn't pay the monthly debt service because SSI is really, really designed to help with food and shelter, okay? So I just wanted to mention that. Guardianship can be applied for 6 months prior to the child turning 18. In the state of Texas, there is a such thing as supported decision-making. There is a such thing as partial guardianship. If you have full guardianship, you're taking their rights away. They can't drive, they can't vote. Partial guardianship will leave some of their rights intact. The supported decision-making agreement is something where you kind of you help them with decision-making processes, and usually that's recommended to have a power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney with that. But a qualified attorney can help you prepare these documents. This is not a DIY project. Do not do it yourself, special needs trust, any of these things. Work with a qualified attorney. We're happy to make referrals to attorneys that we know are good that can help you with this process. A general rule of thumb on the guardianship, again, entire presentations on guardianship and what you need to know about that for the state of Texas. But generally speaking, if the child's IQ is 70 or below, some real consideration as to guardianship or partial guardianship needs to be taken into consideration, because if it is, every attorney is a little bit different, but most attorneys feel that if the IQ is 70 or below, that the individual doesn't have the capacity to understand what they're signing if they're signing a power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney. So you just have to keep those things in mind. And the last thing I want to mention on that is just because that's where they are right now, it doesn't mean that that's going to be where they are forever. So maybe partial guardianship is in line for somebody high functioning autism or ADHD or some of the other things. But the state of Texas horribly refers to people as wards, but they get their rights back. They can get their rights back. So as our loved ones are maturing and becoming more and more independent, it is possible that this isn't in stone forever. So just, be aware of that. So we are coming to the end of our presentation today, and I'm really glad that you've been here. Some of the things to remember while planning for special needs, some of the things, we've hit on a lot of them today and throughout our presentation. One big thing. So I think basically everything on the screen we've touched on, for the exception of the waivers and the interest list. Again, entire presentations on that. That in itself is an animal, and everybody needs to know about the waivers and the interest list. But one thing that we didn't hit on that's super, super important is child support post 18 needs to be redirected to a special needs trust. This would be a first party special needs trust. There is a Medicaid payback on that. Basically, when your child turns 18, a lot of times in the state of Texas, if you find yourself divorced and you're getting child support, many times, sorry if you're not, but many times child support continues post 18 for our loved ones with disability. But that is counted as income for them through the Social Security Administration. So you're going to want to get that child support redirected to a special needs trust so it won't be counted against them, and they won't be denied or be in a back pay situation to the Social Security Administration. Again, this is something that you need a court order for. It is possible that you can get a court order yourself without an attorney if you've got both willing parties are willing to have it redirected to a special needs trust. Of course, you have to have a special needs trust open to redirect it to a special needs trust. But also, you can work with your attorneys on that in getting that court order. But it is a court order that is needed to just redirect it. It is not as simple of just opening a special needs trust and then redirecting the child support to the special needs trust. You got to have proof of all of that. So that's really, really important. And we've actually seen people messed up on that. Because they simply just did not know that is the case. Okay, so I'd like to just take this moment for you to meet my team. At Consolidated Planning Group, we are, again, a holistic special needs planning firm, but I work on a collaborative team with awesome professionals, and I always just like to take a moment to share our team with you. So thank you for taking a look at that. And we always offer free personalized consultations to talk to you more about your unique situation and what your planning needs are, whether you need a future care cost estimate because you simply don't know what that looks like and you need to plan for that, or you need a Social Security analysis or help, kind of help in that department. Wherever you are in that planning process, we can help you. And we want to empower you, with the tools and resources that you need to be successful. So it's been my pleasure being here with you today. All those webinars that I was talking about that we have out there, they're all out there on our YouTube channel. We have a Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. In today's email that comes out with our presentation later, there'll be a link in there so you can subscribe to that. We also post other meetings that we're having, and also other organizations that serve disabilities, some different programs that they may have, or activities that might be going on. We'll post those on our Consolidated Planning Group Facebook page. So having said that, I would just, if there's any other questions, I would love to take any other questions and turn it back over to you, Deborah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Allison, for working with us on this. And yes, if anybody has any questions related to VR, Texas Workforce Solutions, North Central, please feel free to reach out to me. We thank you all for joining. It was a great presentation, great information, Allison. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye now.